Hello, everyone. So, for this semester, the topic that I've really chosen to delve into is ethics in graphic design and how they apply to the decisions that we make. Ethics has always been a really important topic for me because I personally care a lot about how my decisions affect the people around me, and in turn, the business I work for and how it affects my community, my environment, so on and so forth. So, one of the first times ethics was really brought up in the world of graphic design was when the First Things First manifesto came out in the early 1960s. This was because our world had become overly saturated with advertising and the use of mass messaging to impact our environment and our surroundings. The manifesto was a call to action to take a step back and to reconsider our role as designers in our environment. With such an influential power, we needed to rethink how we were pursuing our jobs and what kind of jobs we were pursuing. With that, let's take a quick look at the difference between morals and ethics, because this is a common topic of debate when deciding the difference between right and wrong. Morals, according to the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, is more of a set of personal values, where ethics is an overarching standard that the masses can apply to. A good way to look at it as you can be a very ethical person but have no morals because you understand what is acceptable in public. But you can be a very moral person and be lacking in what is generally considered ethical values. Take, for example, religious extremists. They are morally doing what they believe is right according to their religion and their God. But ethically, most people, and the entire planet for that matter, would tend to disagree. This obviously is not a situation that is design related, but it's a good way to understand the difference between how your moral values can be very ethically different than what the entirety of people have decided is good and bad and acceptable. With that, when we look at doing good, we need to look at ethics versus morals because we want to meet the standard that will appeal to the masses in a way that is positive versus pushing our own moral beliefs that may or may not be widely acceptable. So when we look at our design ethics, we can break it up into two categories. First, let's look at the personal side. Our business practices are incredibly important when it comes to being an ethical designer. If you're going to pursue an ethical business practice, you need to consider your pricing, your skill, and your quality when confronting a client about what you can produce for them. In turn, research is also heavily impacted by your ethical standard for design. If you come at a project giving the client what you think looks good without doing any research, you may not be marketing to their audience in a way that is actually going to appeal to them. You may be providing a product that looks very good, but does not actually benefit the client in any way. In turn, honesty is the most important value when you are thinking of your ethical practices in design. If you're not being honest with your client, you are not being an ethical designer. We also need to look at the public value of our ethics. And by public, I mean what we're putting out into the world. Your client, first and foremost, is your highest standard when you're looking at your ethics. And by that, I mean ethically, are you willing to go below what you believe is right to make more money? Are you going to pursue a client that you know produces a product that hurts the consumer, or are you going to go in the route where you pursue a client that produces a product that is ethically strong in its ability to be honest? With that, research is incredibly important when you are pursuing ethics in your design. And I don't mean ethics as in your background to help produce a good product. I mean your ethics within choosing the person you want to work for. If you pursue a company, you should understand and know what they are about and what they value before you go into working for them. You may find that a company that you thought was very morally encompassing was not, and at that point, you've already created work for them, so you can't really go back on it. The environment is also something to consider when we are considering ethics in our design. We need to consider the value and the quality of the product and how that affects the environment. Are we pursuing something with cheap, materials, materials that hurt our ecosystems, materials that end up in the ocean, materials that end up polluting our environment? That's all something to consider whenever you pursue a company and the kind of product that you're willing to market. With that, you also have to consider your messaging. Messaging is the most important when it comes to how you come off to the consumer. Messaging can be psychologically damaging or beneficial depending on how you put it out into the world. With messaging, aesthetic comes hand in hand. You want to design with an aesthetic that is at the same level of value as your product. A very good product with a poor aesthetic will not make its way into popularity because it doesn't appeal to people, where a very bad product with a great aesthetic is going to have more popularity, and in turn, it could have a negative effect on the consumer and the client and our environment. So this is why honesty is so important on both levels, because you want to be upfront about the product that you are pursuing and the client that you are taking on. So what does honesty really mean in the world of design? Why is it so important? Other than putting out something at face value that is good for everyone, we have to take responsibility over what we're doing, because design is so influential. If we are not taking responsibility, we are potentially hurting not only the consumer, but our client. We need to pursue things with a level of integrity and accountability. If we can do that, we will earn trust, not only with our client, but for the client with their consumer. If the consumer trusts the client, they're going to be loyal to the brand, and in turn, they're going to respect the brand. And that comes full circle. If you can produce quality messaging that is responsible and honest, your client will trust your ability to help them. They will be loyal to you, and they will respect your ability to market them properly. With that, it is important to consider the effects of unethical design. Because we have such influence over the masses, we need to consider how we can affect people in a very unhealthy way. There are plenty of ways that we can do this, but one example that I think we can all relate to is how body image can be greatly skewed by negative or unhonest design. Take, for example, the image of this woman. She has been skewed heavily to meet a standard that is unrealistic. Even here, a very famous, well-known person cannot even meet the standards that we are setting for what body image should be all about. It's not just women. Men encounter this as well. Images like this can psychologically damage our consumer. We can cause mental illness with unresponsible design. Even using a famous male to reach a standard that is unrealistic can damage young men into taking steroids or worse. So let's wrap it up. Doing good, because design influences our standard of living and our quality of life. If we are creating a standard that is unrealistic, the quality of life in the consumer is going to be less than, because they will never reach that standard. As you can see in this presentation, I've pointed out a handful of levels of how ethics plays into design, into more than just designing for a company or a campaign that provides a positive message. There are a lot more elements into our decisions when we are making a design and choosing a client. I would not yet argue that as a designer you are a bad person if you do not pursue ethical or moral opinions. But I will say, within my findings, it has been greatly and heavily pushed that unethical design has a negative impact on not only the consumer and the mass mentality of who we're marketing to, but also the designer. Because if you're marketing and helping push something that you don't believe in, you're belittling your own personal values and in turn not valuing yourself. Thank you.